Hi, I'm Griffin Johnson, and this is Armchair History. This video today is in collaboration with my friend Brandon. You can find his channel by searching Brandon F on YouTube. I highly recommend subscribing, or at least checking out his videos that go hand in hand with this one. He'll be covering the broad cultural aspects of the event I'm here to discuss today, the charge of the Light Brigade. It was the second year of the Crimean War, and British forces were strangling the Russian garrison defending Sevastopol. In a desperate attempt to break the siege, the main Russian army launched an attack on the British-occupied port city of Balaclava to break the Allied supply line. In reaction, British and Turkish forces were deployed to face off with the Russians. The attack opened up with the Russian army quickly capturing the first line of defense surrounding the port city, but by the time they made it to the main defensive line held by British and Turkish forces, they fell flat on their face. The British Heavy Brigade, the armored counterpart to the Light Brigade, would end up seeing a lot of action early in that day, action the Light Brigade was restricted from partaking in, as they were on orders to remain static. This added another layer of frustration onto the famed cavalry expert Captain Nolan, a key figure in this battle. Discontent with the lack of exercise from the Light Brigade, he would beg the head command relentlessly to utilize the Light Brigade's brisk potential, but wouldn't have any success, at least initially. The man responsible for the inaction of the Light Brigade was Head Commander Lord Raglan. Aware of the competence of the Light Brigade, he was hesitant to deploy them, as losing his best cavalry may leave his army vulnerable to react to immediate threats. But as the Russian attack grew weak, he finally found opportune conditions to put the Light Brigade to use. The order was sent. The Light Brigade would need to eliminate a group of disorganized Russian soldiers attempting to carry away British artillery on the abandoned outer defenses. Nolan, the cavalryman, would be in charge of delivering the order. Nolan approached Lord Lucan, the head commander of both the Heavy and the Light Brigade, to issue it. The order had quite ambiguously stated that the Light Brigade would go in and attack a band of Russian soldiers head-on, and 5 minutes later the Heavy Brigade would follow up, sweeping up any resistance and prevent the Light Brigade from being counterattacked by Russian forces. Nolan would not actually give Lord Lucan the written order. Instead, he told it verbally, adding on even more ambiguity to the stipulations of the order. In confusion, Lord Lucan asked Nolan to specify where exactly he wanted to send the brigades, as there were no Russians in sight from his position. Nolan gestured broadly with his arm, pointing in the incorrect direction, the direction that the entire Russian army was positioned, and it just so happens that there was a large element of Russian artillery that had been set up with the bulk of the army, allowing for easy misinterpretation of this order. It is here where historians begin to dissent, so listen carefully. There's reason to believe that Nolan may have pointed the wrong direction on purpose in order to exercise the Light Brigade's full potential against a Russian position. Nolan had spent his entire life writing numerous books on the use of cavalry, and frequently advocated for direct attacks with them. It does sound a little peculiar, however, that Nolan would intentionally misdirect the cavalry towards, ostensibly, certain death, but we'll get back to that later. As the order was meant to be executed quickly and without question, the commander of the Light Brigade, Lord Cardigan, would deploy before there was any realization or protest at the blunder. With the order received, the stage is now set, and it is time for the Light Brigade to see action. Forward the Light Brigade is called by command, the bugles sound, and 600 horse begin set pace to a trot. Obscure, the horsemen's targets are far in the distance. They approach the entrance of the valley, and what can be distinguished now are large formations of enemy troops lining the hills. The brigade enters this envelopment of guns, but there's no noise yet. In fact, it's quiet, but soon a faint noise can be heard calling from behind. It's Captain Nolan. Zealous, he rides in front of the 600 shouting. At the same time, the Russian guns in the crest now rupture, volcanic with cannon shot. The horses quickly begin a gallop as fire rains down on them. Before Nolan's decry can be decrypted, an exploding shell bursts in front of him, killing him instantly. He is among the first casualties of those charging. Molten smoke pours into the valley from the guns, gunpowder blown at constant rate, the sky is swept into darkness. As the noble 600 close in on the enemy, carnage proliferates as the brigade attenuates. Bone fragments and shrapnel from landed shells do equal the damage of the cannonballs themselves. The horsemen, now closer to the guns than ever, are met with another wave of fire. Volleys from the Russian infantry melt off the outside layers of the Light Brigade. Just when all hope seems lost, however, French cavalry storm behind a battery of Russian guns, silencing them immediately. The Light Brigade finally reaches their target. Now it's their turn. Bloodthirsty, they unleash fury at the bulwark of artillerists and Russian horsemen. It's a slaughter, both sides cutting one another down like animals. The Russians on the brink of retreat will soon be met with relief from their own reinforcements, but if the order Nolan delivered is followed exactly, the Heavy Brigade should come in to assist their comrades. As the fighting continues, the Heavy Brigade cannot be found, however, and to make matters worse, the main Russian cavalry force is now blocking the Light Brigade's escape. Lord Cardigan, commander of the Light Brigade, is nowhere to be seen, and so, alone, abandoned, and surrounded, the Light Brigade must fight its way back to friendly lines. An opening is found, however, where the French cavalry had mounted their assault, and so the remaining Light Brigade retreat quickly through the gap, but take heavy casualties that mile back to Allied lines. The field falls silent. All that can be heard now are just a few guns going off sporadically. In just 20 minutes, hundreds of men have been slaughtered on the field without either side achieving really any practical gains. The charge is over. Russian Lieutenant Kubitovich would go on to say, "The English fought with astounding bravery, and when we approached their dismounted and wounded men, even these refused to surrender, and continued to fight till the ground was soaked with their blood." The soldiers in the Light Brigade had been furious, not at their order, but rather at the Heavy Brigade who failed to arrive. Many speculate that it was because of the feud both commanders had with one another that had been going on for 30 years. If they had arrived, the British cavalry may have single-handedly won the entire engagement. And back on to the point of Captain Nolan, no one really knows what he was yelling when he came out to join the charge, but it remains suspicious that he ran out in front of all of the cavalry as if he was leading the charge instead of approaching the commander to order a retreat. Historians will forever continue the debate on Nolan's intentions, as there's no real evidence to prove either conviction. Thank you for watching. I'd like to thank my patrons on Patreon, Emmanuel, James, Emerson, Adam, Derek, and Alex. And those working on the Armchair History team, Tiberiu Vatumanu, my graphic artist Michael Sezin, and my animator Marcel for making this video possible. If you want to know more about the significance of this conflict, join me next time for my video on the impact of the war, and don't forget to subscribe to Brandon F. and myself. Thank you again, and I'll see you next time.